Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
I'm Carmelita.
And we're here to talk about the 2011 remake of Fright Night, starring Anton Yelchin, Colin Farrell, Toni Collette, Imogen Poots, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, and David Tennant. Written by Marty Noxon based on a Tom Holland script and his original movie. Directed by Craig Gillespie on a $30 million budget. Grossed $41 million at the box office, but only about 18.5 of that was a U.S. side. So, Carmelita, welcome back to Film Strip.
Thank you so much for inviting me back. I'm so happy to be here.
I mean, it's vampire movie time. Who else are we going to have?
It's like my favorite thing. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. And, you know, when you and I reviewed the original Fright Night, you mentioned that you had not seen the remake yet. And in general, you don't go for remakes. So I wanted to kind of pick up with that. Vampire movie, first off, why did you avoid this 10 years ago? And, you know, what is it about remakes that you just don't go for?
You know, I'm trying. It's funny because we typically think of as people get older that they get more closed-minded, and maybe that's true in some respects. You get more firm in knowing what it is you like and don't like, but I'm trying to be more balanced. I'm trying to be more open-minded these days because I can be a purist and I can be stubborn. And traditionally, I avoid remakes because I'm just like, there's no way it's going to be as good as the original. I'm just going to be disappointed or angry or outraged or not pleased. So in the past, to spare myself coming out of the movie theater pissed off, I would just avoid them. Pretty much all the time. And every once in a while, someone would, you know, at a friend's house, they'd put a movie on, or someone would talk me into something. But for the most part, kind of keep my distance from remakes. But this is the power of podcasting.
It talks you into so many bad things.
When I get asked to watch a remake to discuss with someone on their podcast, it puts me in the mind frame of kind of just clearing away expectations, just go into something with an open mind, open to whatever the experience is going to be. And so far, I've had some pretty good results with that. There's something about the fact that I know I'm going to be on record talking about something.
Yeah.
That I'm able to be like, okay, don't be an ass. Just sit down, give it a chance, evaluate this movie on its own merits. And so, you know, Fright Night, like we talked about, it's vampires. I love vampires. I should have been open to giving this a chance when it came out. Colin Farrell. I had a huge crush on Colin Farrell in the early 2000s, which had already kind of waned a little by the point this came out, but that should have been a selling point. I love Toni Collette. I love her. I'm always happy to see Toni Collette starring in something. So there were a lot of things about this that I should have been drawn to, but I was being stubborn at the time. And I can recognize that in myself. I'm trying to get better. And I'm so glad that you encouraged me in our previous discussion of the original Fright Night. And so when we talked about sitting down again to talk movies and Fright Night, the remake came up, it was like, yeah, I am open to seeing that. And I really thank you for that because this was fun.
Well, good. I'm glad you were open to the experience. I can say this, that if you go back and listen to me 11 years ago, there's some of those movies that are on Film Strip Record I really wish I could give a second look at. I probably watch them again, and I'm a lot more fair than I used to be. I used to be pretty rough on stuff. I think the older I've gotten, the more I appreciate what it takes to actually pull something together. And
true.
I can appreciate failure that happens because people are actually trying to do something. It's when a movie's lazy that it annoys me. And that's the one where I usually will still rant about that. And I've used the medium popcorn label a lot of times for stuff like that. Cause I felt like, oh, you could have been great, but you just decided to be cheap and stupid. And, that always bugs me. But I think about a movie like Batman and Robin that I totally railed on, many, many moons ago. And I can watch that now and just totally laugh and go like, this is the dumb popcorn movie, and it's not supposed to be, high art. What was I thinking? What did I want it to be? And not that those Burton ones were either, So anyway, it's just funny how that stuff goes. And here on Film Strip, I mean, goodness gracious, it's whiplash sometimes to review stuff like Leprechaun 3 and then turn around and do Dr. Strangelove. So that's just what we do here. So it's a lot of fun to come back to this. Now, to get to Fright Night, I knew when this was coming out because I had seen the trailer for it. I was like, holy cow, Colin Farrell is a vampire? Sure. Because I liked him too. I maybe had a man crush. I don't know what it was. And then he kind of like went away because he had some like personal problems and he got that straightened out. And then he came back and he just started doing weird, interesting stuff. He would do this. He would do a period piece. I'm maybe the only person on earth that doesn't hate the Total Recall remake he was in. I thought that was actually better than the it's more true to the story than, I'm a Philip K. Dick purist, but I like Colin Farrell. So they did that. Anton Yelchin. I'm like, I've loved this guy since he was a kid, Charlie Bartlett and Alpha Dog and, all this. And it's so sad that, he was taken from us so soon. Died when he was 27 in a freak accident with his car. But I knew him, and Toni Collette, I could watch her act the phone book and I'm down. She does cool stuff all the time, even nothing roles. She's fun. I like her. And so, I was into this. I was like, oh yeah, this looks like to be cool. And Christopher Mintz-Plotz, it's past my age range, but like all the Seth Rogen-ish humor, like all those guys came along. And I just found something really funny about that because those guys did not give a F about anything, and they just would go out and do this outlandish stuff. And it's very much similar to like the early 80s when I was coming up. People did stuff that like Clutch the Pearls, and I always
would never get made today.
Right. But I appreciate humor and comedians that will push that boundary. I think you have to have people like that because that's what makes art fun. Sure. So you throw all that in a blender, and then you tell me Marty Noxon is writing this thing. And I've had a lot of years of having fun with Marty on the Buffy show that Brian and I did for a number of years. And there's some of her decisions that I thought weren't as creatively interesting as maybe she does, but I'll never knock the fact that she is a prolific writer and producer and knows how to make a good, fun story. So when I found out they were kind of giving Marty Noxon, who is probably the most accomplished of the Joss Whedon Buffy writers of all of it. A lot of them have gone on to do some good stuff, but she's the one that's done incredible stuff. They gave her that. And then I found out an interesting tidbit on the front end when this movie was being made, that they went to Tom Holland and they said, we want to do this, but we need you to do the story treatment for it. And he gets story credit on this, not just because of his original screenplay, but he said, well, if you're going to do it nowadays, this is what you should do. And then Marty Noxon took that and gave it all of its charm and all the good dialogue and stuff. But he came up with you do it in Vegas because it's the best setup ever for a vampire. You can say you work all night, you sleep all day, nobody blinks an eye, and nobody's from there. So people come and go, nobody cares. It's great cover. And I thought, well, that's a genius turn on how to do this story.
Definitely.
And so I was down for this. I went and saw it. I drug my poor wife to it on opening weekend. We went and saw it in August, and I saw it in 3D. I mean, we had the whole experience. It was a lot of fun, and you can see now, with the parts that are supposed to be 3D and stuff. And I gotta say, like, some of it dates better than others. We can talk about that as we go into it, but I had a good time with it, and it kind of bummed me out that it didn't make as much money as I thought it could have. Like it really wasn't a hit. It was like 6th when it premiered, and then it just dropped off the map, and forgot because it was in a weird time in movies. I mean, they don't want to put it out too early in the year because nobody wants to see this kind of thing early in the year, right? So you put it out around Halloween, though. At that time, you're going to get creamed by Paranormal Activity or whatever Saw movies coming out. Right. So they put it out in August, which is the end of summer. it's not really a summer movie. It's not something that's going to get the kids out. And I don't think people just knew what it was. So this one's definitely had a life of its own on home viewing and stuff. But, it's 10 years old now. And that's the other thing too, is like, gosh, this movie's 10 years old. Where did my life go? Cause I can remember going to see it, just like it was yesterday or whatever. But no, I saw this when it came out. So I liked it then, but it had been a while since I rewatched it. I think we saw it it was on Netflix or one of those several years back. It popped up on one of the streaming services and we're like, yeah, let's rewatch that. And we rewatched it. And, it's been 3 or 4 years since I watched it for this review. So it's not one I come back to as often as the original Fright Night, but I'm okay with that. And as far as me on remakes, I mean, as long as, again, they're not completely lazy, I can have some fun with them. Like a good example of that, like the When a Stranger Calls remake actually takes the best part of that story and makes a whole movie out of it. And that was a smart move. Like it's not entirely executed great because the third act, it really falls apart, but that story's really only meant to last about 30 minutes anyway.
Right.
So that one's okay. The Black Christmas remake, the first one, not the most recent one, is awful. And it's awful like on a level that you could laugh at with a bunch of friends. But if you watch it by yourself, you need to question your life. Like it's not good on any level. So like, they come and go. They go in a lot of different ways of how they could work. So I go into remakes with the mindset and the idea of, can you take what's there and not necessarily improve upon it, but can you give me a new spin with it? Can you give me something that is going to make me go like, oh, that's different than the last. Okay, what's that about? But still kind of get to the same point, because if the movie's good enough to get a remake, it obviously had something that lasted. Like we talked about last time, that original Fright Night is a cult classic. No,
absolutely. One of my recent experiences with giving something a try and being very pleased was the Rob Zombie Halloween remakes. My friends at the Film Alchemist asked if I would participate in a discussion on that. I had never seen them, and I was like, okay, I'm game. I'll do it. I actually really love them, and in part because they take, the root of what's great about the Michael Myers story, and but they are, Rob Zombie is willing to take it in different directions. And so, some of the great bones are there, but he takes it in a different, he goes a different route. And so it stands on its own. I don't have to compare it to the original because nothing will be as good as Halloween.
Right.
Or have that same impact that Halloween had on my life. But I can enjoy Rob Zombie's Halloween for what it is, for what it's trying to do, for what they had the gumption to attempt and execute really well. And so, yeah, I think, or you have on the flip side of that is when you have something like the Psycho remake where it's like, let's do a scene for scene remake. And it's like, come on.
Yeah.
Like that's, you can't make that work. You've got to be willing to take some risks in changing the story a little, in taking elements that you want to expand upon, updating it. Like you have to be willing to do something with the story.
Exactly. And Mike from Atkins Undisputed and the Dana Buckler Show joined Ron and I for a very interesting discussion of that Psycho remake. Go back in the archives. You can check that out because we had a lot of fun going, what the hell is that? And the answer is
do that.
And a very expensive, like art school project or something, just depending on what you ask the director on what day. But to get around to where you are, and I'll agree with you on those Rob Zombie Halloween remakes. I've come around on them to the point to say, you know what? I give him credit for being different and doing his own thing, and particularly with that second one, because he didn't want to make it. He didn't want them to make it. And then when he found out they were going to, he said, well, at least let me do it. And he did what they wanted for the first 10 minutes. And then he did what he wanted. And I would never recommend this generally, but I will tell people all the time, if you want to really experience what that Rob Zombie Halloween 2 is, watch the director's cut of it. Don't watch the theatrical cut. It doesn't make a ton more sense, but at least you can see what he's trying to do. The theatrical cut is cut to hell so bad you have no idea what's going on in it. And it's one of the few movies, like, I remember just walking out of the theater. I even walked out like as it was ending, like, whatever, this is awful. And then when I watched it again later, the director's cut, I was like, okay, I kind of see what you're doing. And I've come around on that as, again, a really interesting experiment of the idea. It's almost like, let's pretend Halloween was this true crime redneck saga. And, that's what he did with it. Yes.
And I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
It's a much different experience. And that's what's cool about it. And so when we get back to Fright Night here, going into this, I'm like, okay, what are you going to give us different? And they give us a lot of the same, but they give us a lot different too. So let me do a quick plot summary and we'll get into talking about the movie. Charlie Brewster, played by Anton Yelchin, is climbing up the social ladder as a Las Vegas high school thanks to ditching his geeky friends and his past after he starts dating super popular Amy, played by Imogen Poots. But that past is coming back to warn him by his former best friend, Ed, and who is convinced that a vampire is preying on locals and has come for some of their mutual friends and lives in Charlie's neighborhood, in fact, next door. Charlie's reluctant to hear any of this until he starts noticing strange things happening with that new neighbor, a guy named Jerry, who says he's a construction worker who takes night shifts and sleeps during the day. But when a neighbor disappears, Charlie investigates and finds out it's all true. Jerry is indeed a vampire. Jerry, naturally annoyed by all of this, decides to go after Charlie, his mom, and his girlfriend. They have a great chase. Chris Sarandon makes a great cameo. We'll talk about that. But his mom ends up in the hospital after an attack, and Jerry even turns Ed into a vampire. So Charlie goes to seek help the only place he knows he can find it. Famed vampire killer, magician, showman in Vegas, Peter Vincent. So Peter initially refuses any of this stuff to help Charlie and reveals later on that both of his parents were killed by a vampire. It's later actually revealed to be Jerry himself, and an interesting plot twist. But he does give Charlie some help and a stake blessed by St. Michael that will kill Jerry and turn all of his victims back into humans. Ed attacks at Peter's place, and Charlie reluctantly kills his former friend, and Amy attacks, but Jerry turns the tables on her and turns her into a vampire and takes her away, much like the first one, but without the sexy dance scene in the club. Charlie and Peter plan an assault at the Jerry house, and when all looks like is lost, Peter's able to shoot holes in the ceiling enough, or actually Charlie shoots holes in the ceiling to let enough sunlight in to give Peter a break so that he can distract Jerry, and then putting on a fire retardant suit as part of one of Peter's magic acts, he lights himself on fire, throws himself at Jerry, and is able to distract the vampire enough to stake him with that St. Michael's stake, turning all the old friends, including Dave Franco, back into normal. And Amy turns back to normal, and everything is cool, and Jerry's vanquished. And we end with Charlie and Amy finally able to get some alone time in Peter's Vegas penthouse as credits roll. So a lot of stuff to unpack there. We do a lot of different things. And I think the first thing we've got to talk about is the cold open that we jump into here. And I credit almost all of this to everything I know about Marty Noxon and the way she stages stuff. This is how Buffy episodes open. There's always a cold that may or may not involve the actual cast, but there's something that's going to set up what is going to happen for the rest of the thing. And you don't really get a good look at what's the big bad or any of it. You just know that there's like some horrendous murder happening. And one thing I'll give this movie credit for is it is an R-rated horror movie. And so many times the horror remakes do the PG-13 thing, which people rail on as they hate. And some of them are better than others, but I understand why that decision gets made financially by a studio. But this time they said, nope, this is a hard R. We're going to drop F-bombs. We're going to have all kinds of crazy stuff. The only thing we're not going to have is real nudity in this, but we're going to have a lot of blood and a lot of gore. And we get it right here at the beginning. That murder at the Vegas house is pretty unsettling to start with.
Oh yeah, it's a bloodbath. And it was like right off the bat, they're telling me, we're not giving you a scene by scene of the original Fright Night. They're letting me know right out the gate that they're doing it a little differently. Because, in the original, we don't get to the really hard horror gore of the story until that last half, really that last act.
Yeah.
We slowly ease into the gory horror in the original. And this one is like, nope, we're going to open with that and just let you know where you're at and set you up. And I thought it was really cool.
It is cool. And they open, though, very similar. They're setting us up because I had forgotten how this movie started. And I was like, Are they going back to the original where Charlie and Amy are making out? Because you see
Right.
the Peter Vincent commercial on TV, which is hilarious that they turned him into like David Blaine or,
Like Chris Angel. Mind
Yes.
freak.
Yes. All of that. I'm like, yes, I am there for that. That is perfect. David Tennant doing that is awesome. I'm watching all that. And you see this dog is kind of eating the sandwich that's been left behind by what you assume are the kids that are making out on the couch. But no, you come back and you pull back and realize there's a kid running for his life because his parents have been slaughtered in the house in front of him. And he's trying to get his dad's gun and unlock it. And I mean, yeah, it's a very startling, gory scene. And then you jump right into the great credits flying over the desert. And if you've ever been to Vegas, like I try to explain to people where I'm from, where it's lush greenery everywhere and stuff. When you fly to Vegas, you really should fly at night because you appreciate the fact that you're flying over nothing. And then all of a sudden, boom, lights out of nowhere. But in the daytime, I've gone in where I've flown in at night before and then flown out in the daytime. And it reminded me so much about this guy was just like, oh, there's actually neighborhoods down there. You don't even realize, like, yeah, people live and work around Las Vegas who aren't part of the casino culture. But I love that as a setting and the way that we set that up. And they drop us right into who these people are and the fact that the mom character was important last time, but when you cast Toni Collette, you've cast like the coolest Gen X mom that you could get for this millennial kid. And I don't know, I liked the way her and Anton Yelchin played off of each other just in that first scene. Like it set up their whole relationship absolutely. With like 3 lines. Yeah, absolutely.
No. And I think, this version of the mother character, she seems to have just a healthier relationship with her son, and she seems less preoccupied. Like in the original, the mother is very much kind of talking about how, she's divorced and she wants to be dating, and there's a lot of like focus on that and her immediate interest in Jerry.
Yeah.
And in this one, she's your average woman. She's attracted to the guy, but she immediately says, like, there's some dialogue where she pretty much says, like, yeah, I don't know about, dating a guy like that. And she comes across as capable, intelligent, caring. She's a single mother, but that isn't something that they kind of push in our face as being, a miserable existence. Right. She seems like she's doing pretty good and she has a good relationship with her son, and it's nice.
You think about the difference between 1985 and 2011.
Yeah.
That's not something that's that uncommon anymore. In 1985, that would have been like, oh my goodness, your life is over, Mrs. Brewster. But it really wasn't. She had a job and had a life, and that was, avant-garde for its day. And now this one's like, yeah, of course, she's her own real estate agent. So she probably makes really good money flipping houses in Vegas. She's one of those. And, we also got to remember too, like this is on the tail end and got written and made on the tail end of the housing bust. So the fact that she's like still successful means she's really good at what she does. So she can be confident. And Charlie is very much like you would imagine she grew up as a latchkey kid, because he just comes and goes and it's no big deal. But what I love about this is that the dichotomy is totally different. Instead of being a geek and really kind of an outsider who's into nerdy stuff, Charlie like used to be, and then the hot girl paid attention to him at school and somehow started dating him.
And
we'll never know why. Right, exactly. He dumped all of that, started wearing Puce tennis shoes and all this stuff. And I don't know. I think it's perfect casting to get an actor like Anton Yelchin, who can play so many things and played so many things in his career. But you could see like in a second, he could turn on the geek and then he could turn it off and he could be cool because he's got a cool voice and all of that stuff. And he's kind of lanky and tall and but especially by Hollywood standards. And so I don't know, you immediately like him, but you realize like this Charlie isn't the same Charlie we had before. This is Charlie much more advanced. And I think it's interesting to mention here too, that Charlie was the one that was really pushing the sex on Amy last time, who finally reluctantly kind of gave into him, and then they had to blow up. And they repeat that scene here, but it's a totally different dynamic. Amy is like, hey, let's go. Like, right, you got 5 minutes? Let's go right now. Like, she is much more aware, and you get the sense that she is much more mature and confident in herself than Charlie is. And it's cute to watch that play out.
Absolutely. Well, and I think one thing that I caught on in this version was these two kids had better communication. Most definitely, which I think too is part of the times. Like I think in the original, some of those exchanges are about what you expect in a teen movie.
Right.
And I think it's kind of the level of understanding that a lot of us had about relationships and communication.
True. Yeah.
We didn't used to be very good at that. And I think people are more aware now and are better. And so it's reflected in the art that, these teenagers actually have like some pretty decent communication skills. He does kind of withhold from her for a while, but when she confronts him, like they actually have a conversation.
Oh, that's one of the funniest scenes. She's like, you don't just get to dump me. And like Toni Collette's face while she's coming halfway down the stairs, like, I love this girl. Like just the way she looks on her face, like, oh, this is going to be funny. Watching him get his head handed to him by this chick. No, I really did like that they set up the conceit differently this time, that Charlie was somebody who was trying to run away from all the cool, geeky horror movie stuff that he would have been into, because he thinks that I can't be that to hang out with this girl and her douchey friends. And there may be no actor that plays a D-bag better than Dave Franco. Like there's just something about the way that guy looks and his face, and just he can just turn that on, and it's like, you're such a smarmy little jerk, but you can't help but not laugh at him because he's so funny too. And he's barely in this. He's literally only in about 3 scenes. Learn everything you need to know when Charlie rolls up at the school, and he's got that whatever Frappuccino thing you get from Starbucks. And he's like, man, you can't let the girls take you out, man. You always get these girly drinks, but he takes it from him and starts drinking it. So I'm like, yes, that's exactly what a guy like that would do.
He calls him a pretty pony, and then he takes his drink.
Exactly. It's a funny moment between them, but we set up everything here to get to the fact that he has ditched his friend Ed. Christopher Mintz plot. So if you're going to get a geeky best friend, that's like typecasting in some ways, because I mean it's just McLovin with an edge again.
Pretty
and
much.
Yeah, and I mean give it to the guy. He's leaned into that and just kept playing that for years, and he's an accomplished actor at this point. He's done a lot of stuff, but at this point he was right at the height of that. So to get him to come in and do this, I mean, this is a nothing role, because that's the one thing about this that's different, is the Evil Ed role is cut way down from the original. And from everything I read, there aren't like deleted scenes. Like the hour and 45-minute movie you get is what they wanted you to see. So there's really nothing cut except a few minutes of gore here and there, or a few seconds of gore here and there and stuff. So I don't know, what'd you make of the Ed character and the way he plays out this time? Because it's very different than Stephen Jeffries.
It's very different. And I mean, we talked about the original. We talked about how the Ed character was really cool, but the portrayal was kind of wacky. In this one, I don't know. Yeah, like you mentioned that that he has an edge, and he does. He's very self-confident, and he's not afraid to stand up to the popular guys. He's not afraid to confront Charlie about ghosting him. And he can be a little combative and a little insulting, and he had no problem insulting Amy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's, I don't know. It was one of those, like, it was interesting in those first couple scenes. I was like, okay, the Ed character, okay, he's okay. He's not particularly likable.
Yeah.
I sympathize with his plight as being the friend that got left behind, that got ditched. And then at the same time, like, but he's kind of a jerk a little bit. And then for him to get turned so quickly, I was shocked. But then it kind of came together, like, okay, they don't need me to fall in love with Ed.
No, what they need you to understand is Charlie left him behind for reasons that you can actually understand. Like, it's lousy the way he ghosted his friend. Like, and Tony Collette calls him. I was like, you should just talk to him. If you don't want to talk to him, you should just tell him. And his response is exactly what you expect the kid to say. Like, that kind of defeats the purpose. It's like, yeah, he should take the hint. But she's right. It's like, no, you should just tell the dude, like, hey man, I'm not into that anymore. Chill. Yeah. And, but yeah, and that, I think that's also just a marked difference between the times. The nerdy kids don't take it from the popular kids anymore. They're like, whatever. In fact, they're probably cooler in a lot of ways than the preppy, whatever upstart kids. Because I mean, that's all flipped nowadays.
Oh yeah.
And so you get the sense that like, and the fact that they cast Lisa Loeb as his mother. I mean, oh my God, the great cameo.
It made me so happy, like ridiculously happy. Yeah. I did a double take. I was way too stoked about that cameo.
I had forgotten that. Like, I remember seeing it and I had totally forgotten that it was coming. And she opens the door. I was like, oh, Lisa Loeb, I remember you. And I mean, but I'm like going, but this is the Marty Noxon touch, is all this Gen X stuff is going to be laid all over this movie.
Sprinkled in there.
Yeah. For millennials, which is funny. I mean, but it is very much written by somebody who crafted a lot of the cool stuff that you like about Buffy and Angel in some ways, but a lot of Buffy. If you liked anything about Buffy from season 3 on, Marty Noxon had a lot to say about it and had a lot to do with it. And you see that all through this movie too. And being such a big Buffy head, like I caught so many little things like words and phrases, not words, but like phrases and stuff here and there that I'm like, oh, she's just like winking to the audience. Yeah. But this movie though is built to be very post-Scream referential to everything. And I was okay with that for the most part. But I think you're right about the Egg character. We don't need to like him. We need to understand his plight, that he doesn't really want to be friends with Charlie anymore. He just wants Charlie to not die. And that's kind of a big thing. And also, like, all of our friends that are missing when they're doing roll call every day, man, like, that's not happenstance, and it does bring up the big conceit of the movie, is that people come and go from Vegas all the time. That's why Charlie blows it off like it's no big deal. And Ed's the one that says, no, look, I've got, dirt on Jerry, and he's got a whole file on his computer about him. And you see these videos and all the little, he's not in the camera. And there's that other friend talking. And it's funny though, but you're like, yes, that's the kind of stuff that Charlie did last time. The investigative stuff. See, Ed really wasn't into that. He kind of made fun of Charlie and took advantage of him when it was the vampire. And then when he thought he was going crazy, he got worried about him. And he and Amy do the Peter Vincent work. This time they've flipped all that. They've given all of that to Ed to do all the homework basically. And Charlie to be like, whatever, and just trying to get over his friend, and I don't know. It's funny. It brings a lightheartedness to a gory vampire movie.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, Charlie's got the dancer, quote unquote, neighbor or whatever, who obviously he's every teenage boy just staring at her. I think Amy has great lines like, take away 2 pieces of cloth and she's a stripper, and so, they have a whole bit about that, but she's going to become the first victim that we know of from Jerry, and, or that, Charlie gets involved with. And that's going to be a big, big turning point for him when he gets to that point. But we're not quite there yet. We got to talk about Colin Farrell as Jerry.
We do.
Yeah, because Chris Sarandon played that character as this kind of Eurotrash yuppie,
suave, Miami Vice kind of thing going on.
Yeah. And funny you mentioned Miami Vice. Colin Farrell plays it like a construction worker or a guy at the bar. Or if you see Daredevil, he's just playing bullseye without the darts.
Right.
I mean, I'm like, man, this is Colin Farrell being just a redneck, which is funny.
You got this bro energy.
Yes, very bro. Hey, guy, can you loan me a beer? All that kind. I mean, all this
leather
stuff.
Wrist cuff.
Yes, that. But he's like tight jeans and t-shirts, and I don't know. I thought it was funny because he's, he has these huge caterpillar eyebrows. And I can understand that because I live that life too. But the way he just kind of broods them over everybody. I don't know what they told him to do, but whatever acting choices he and Craig Gillespie decided to do together were perfect because he's not even paying homage to the last guy. He's just doing his own thing.
When what I thought was really interesting about his portrayal and this version of Jerry is that, I mean, Colin Farrell is a very attractive man, but right off the bat, you get more menacing than sexy. Like the alarm bells go off a lot faster with him. Something about the way he carries himself, and you don't have a lot of that super syrupy suave charm that Chris Sarandon's Jerry had. This Jerry's a little more rough around the edges, and I don't know, right from the jump, it's like, ooh, there's something about this guy. But that works because we've all seen the original Fright Night. We already know he's the vampire. So you're not going to slip it past us. We know that. And so it works for him to be a little more menacing, a little more unsettling earlier in the film.
Yeah, we talked about that in the last movie, that for a little while they play it off as a mystery. Like, is Charlie crazy? Is this guy a vampire? Until that first kill in the with the cheapy porn music going in the background, that 80 synthesizer. We don't get any of that. It's a totally different soundscape, and the soundtrack in this is almost unrecognizable in a lot of ways. It's just a bunch of there's got pop songs going in the background, or songs that were popular during the time. I should say they were pop songs, and then just sort of atmospheric music. It's not really memorable like the first one, but they're not trying to play it like that. We know he's the bad guy, like you say, and the way that they set him up, as he's got this whole like serial killer den that he's dug into the back of his closet, and he's in his house, and it's later on when Peter Vincent reveals, after Charlie shows him a picture of something he took in Jerry's house, that like, oh, that strain of vampires started, here, and they're diggers. They root in the ground. And I'm like, what a neat little thing to give, like, that vampires would have different modes of operating. Some like castles, some like digging it up in the dirt. And I'm like, so Jerry masking as a construction person isn't much of an act, because he like seems to be able to handle himself with the tools and all this stuff. He did all that to his own house. That's the other thing, is they don't give us his Igor or any helper this time. He's just doing it all himself.
No, most definitely. When I kind of like that, they're in Vegas, a place where we don't traditionally think of people setting down roots. So it's not unusual that his house, most of the house, looks like there's still boxes, like some bachelor just recently moved in and hasn't finished putting all his stuff away.
Right.
And, he's he's got his creepy dungeon, but it doesn't look like a gothic mansion dungeon. It looks like a serial killer. I just put up these rooms really quick and drywalled it, and it's done. It's functional, utilitarian. He's building this nest of vampires, and he doesn't really care what it looks like.
No, because all he wants is just to have his numbers replenished. And that's what we find out, is a lot of these vampires in the ground, and the ones that are locked in those rooms, presumably while they're turning, are just there to become part of his horde at some point. So you figure, like, this guy's been around for 400 years, and he's lost and gained a lot of folks, and so now it's time to go to a new place and build a new one. So he's got teenagers, a missing repairman. It looks like he tries to get the dancer. That's one of the big things. We'll talk about how Charlie breaks her out, but there's a great scene with him and Charlie. They've already met at this point, but it's when he really turns on the bro, as you said, and he's like, I really want some beer. He's trying to get invited in the house. You can tell. And I love how Charlie goes out of his way to like, nope, don't cross that door.
I love it. And I love when they're, they use the sound effect when he does cross into doors successfully. And so some of the sound work that they did when he and Charlie are kind of at the door, and when he goes to reach for the beer, and he's like kind of going to put his hand into the door jamb to grab the beer, and like the sound kind of moves, like you're just like, oh, he can't cross, right? He can't. They kind of play with that they're just like on this razor's edge. He's that close.
I like that scene in particular because it goes on longer than you expect it to.
Yeah.
And normally I'd be like, oh, that scene lasts too long. But I'm like, you know what? No, this movie doesn't breathe a lot. And for them to take the time to be slow and methodical in that moment, I liked that because it sets up what happens next as Charlie decides to go, see what's going on next door, finally after all of that. And he, as of course any kid would do in the 2011s and would do now too. Now they'd be watching a YouTube video of it, but he's got like, Google how to pick a lock. And he's trying to do that. And you realize this, wait a minute, everybody in this town has a fake rock in their garden with a key in it. And, it plays out exactly. And I like the whole bit of trying to get Doris out of the, what a name for a dancer, by the way. Anyway, it's probably not the name she goes by on stage, but whatever. Yeah, but he's trying to get Doris out. And Colin Farrell plays this great because he comes in and, of course, he goes right for her. And it's real gory the way he drinks from her and all that stuff. And it's a real tender moment where she kind of puts her finger up to her mouth while Charlie's watching, like, don't say anything. Like, she doesn't want anything bad to happen to him, which is cute. And when Colin Farrell's done with her and he throws her back in her cell and he walks out, he kind of stops and he sniffs the air. And it's like, he knows Charlie's there. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to figure this out on his own. It's a bit of sadistic nature that gives him a different energy than like what Chris Sarandon had. And I appreciated that as a performance piece.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love, and I love that the kids don't ever really they don't seem to ever really pick up on that. Like, no, vampire, super senses. You're not hiding from him. He's letting you go.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to sneak out of the house and all this stuff. And he's just sitting over there like with his beer and his green apple going like, and then he, they flash around and he's not in his chair anymore. And he's just standing there watching them, waiting for him to go out the front door. This in the theater, when I saw this, it blew my mind because I did not expect this to come. I thought he's going to run out with this woman and it's going to be this big scene. And when she bursts into blood and dust into the scene, I was like, that's a very souped up Buffy dusting right there. That changed things. I was like, oh, wow. Well, that was huge.
I feel like at that point, we didn't realize he was turning everyone.
Right.
Because when he turns Ed in the pool earlier, he gives this whole speech about like, I could give this to you. What do you have to live for?
Which is a similar speech to what Sarandon laid on Stephen Jeffries. Is like, Absolutely. You're so pathetic. Let me give you something you could never have. It plays differently here because Ed is kind of cool with who he is. So it's even sadder. It's like, oh gosh, it's awful. He
doesn't want to leave his life behind. He actually likes the life he's living. He's upset about, the way things went down with Charlie, but he's okay. But because he gave this whole speech, I was kind of like, okay, he kind of went out of his way to turn Ed. So I was not expecting, after having just bit Doris in front of us, that she was turned.
See, I took that as an interesting thing because vampire lore varies. You know this better than I do about stuff. And in Buffy, it was always very explicit. In Buffy, you had to drink from the vampire that was biting you to turn into one. Otherwise, you were just food. And this time, like when he lets Amy drink from him later, it really just hypnotizes her more than anything. It like gets her sort of hooked. It's like a drug. And then he's able to lay into her. This plays much more like Dracula and stuff. When he drinks from you, you're it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things about vampire stories is because there's this wide range of lore, writers can kind of play with that. And anyone who's seen enough vampire movies knows that there are so many different types of vampires and approaches to the mechanics of the vampirism that I'm usually like, okay, if you just kind of give me the basics for a particular story, like this is kind of what the lore is for this story, I'll accept it because it does change. It does vary. But it was surprising because I didn't realize that was the direction we were going. And so when Doris, when Doris dies in the sunlight, it was like, oh,
yeah. Yeah, they really turn it on its head at that point. And what you realize is Jerry let Charlie destroy one of his, brood to prove a point to him. Like, you don't know what you're up against. And
absolutely.
And, like that had to, it already was blowing Charlie's mind. And good. Anton Yelkin's a great actor. And just the way he looks the next day, like his eyes are just like he hadn't slept. He is loked out of his mind, and he's just like, I don't know what to do. Mom, under no circumstances can he come in this house. You don't have time to answer questions right now. And she's like, what? But, he goes off to school the next day and he's researching vampires. He's trying to figure out how to get in touch with Peter Vincent. Well, we're going to get to him in a sec.
Yes.
He and Amy have a little fun part in the library there, but then he goes to Peter, and we've already talked about like the Chris Angel, David Blaine, Vegas show person thing. I love that. I thought it was hilarious, but David Tennant rolls into this movie and absolutely steals it halfway into it.
It's true. Well, so when he's introduced and he's got the long black hair and the pointed black goatee and the whole leather getup, and I'm just like, okay, like this, I'm like really, I'm really entertained by this. I'm really curious to see where this goes. But I did have the thought, I was like, man, they could have got him a better wig and better beard pieces. Tell me you have budget for a better wig. And then when Charlie is able to talk his way up to the penthouse to get this interview, that's his ruse. As Peter Vincent starts taking off the wig, I'm like, oh, nice.
It's supposed to look cheap and hokey.
It's supposed to look cheap. It's supposed to look hokey. It's all part of the illusion. And so I really appreciated that.
And I don't know who his assistant Ginger is, that he has this whole thing. I don't know who that woman is, that actress. They have the best, like, honeymooners, lock horns relationship. Like, he almost burned off my extensions last time. Well, it's because you keep moving, or whatever. And they go back and forth at each other the whole time. And what I love about this Peter Vincent is he's not what you would watch on television. Like, your parents would be okay that you watch the old Peter Vincent show. They probably don't want you to watch this guy because you don't know what he's into. He's totally a Vegas show person. And then when you meet him, he's kind of like, I don't know, Russell Brand meets Steven Tyler. He
he's got this
too much.
Rock star vibe.
Yeah.
He's got this like occultist rock star vibe going.
Exactly.
And it's really funny to watch him slink around.
Yeah, and he's pulling his pants all the time, and he's always talking trash. And what I thought was neat though is that I'm watching this, and I'm going, they want us to think that this guy is a total fraud. Like last time, Peter Vincent was a fake. He was just an actor, and he kind of learned how to be a vampire hunter as the movie went. This time, they slowly reveal like, this guy went this way and collected all of this stuff because he's scared out of his mind about what he knows is real in life. His parents were killed by a vampire and killed by this vampire, which is almost too close on the nose.
That was a step over the line for me.
Yeah.
That it was the same vampire.
Yeah. I was like, if it came from the same like horde of them or whatever, because he recognized their flag or whatever, I'm like, that would have been fine. That was enough. It didn't need to be that it was Jerry that killed his parents, because then it's like, well, now it's Jaws 4. Now it's personal. Like that's a little far. But the journey he goes on, and again, David Tennant is so funny, and it's so weird for him because I'm not a huge Doctor Who fan, but I watch some of his Who stuff, and then I've seen him on things like all these British television shows where he plays these really buttoned up and just straight laced people. And for him to play this just wild character had to be a blast to do. But I loved every minute he was on the screens. I thought this guy is absolutely stealing this movie, and Anton Yelchin is trying to play straight against that. And I can only imagine how much they cracked up on the set trying to get that to go, because I liked the Vincent thing. The only thing I didn't like again was that Jerry was the vampire that killed his family, but I liked all of his cool stuff. And I thought all that worked.
Oh, that penthouse is like my dream.
Right?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're a Vegas staple, you get to live like that. I mean, I'm sure Brittany's got a couple of those too. So
all of the cases with all of his occult relics. Look, I love
right. He's got a grail with holy water in it under a glass case. He's got a pistol for silver bullets. I mean, he's got all of it.
I decorate my apartment kind of like it's Halloween or a graveyard 24/7, 365 days a year. So I get it. Like the aesthetic, I'm into it. And then he just, he has more money than God. So it's like,
yeah,
fancy,
that's it.
Fancy.
And I like that this time though, because they bribed Peter Vincent last time with money because he needed cash. You can't bribe this guy. So how do you convince him? And I love it's 2011. So it's right as smartphones are taking over our lives. And, he's printed out pictures that he's taken off of his fancy smartphone here and left them. And Peter Vincent just happens to look at them later in the evening. And when he sees that flag, that's when it starts coming back to him. Like, I know this is bad. Like, I know that, that's what convinces him is the reality of it versus he had to be bribed into it this time.
Right. Yeah. And it's that little tweak makes it work and you don't question it. It's like, yeah, no, that works in this version.
Exactly. I also like that he's kind of a moron and doesn't really know what's going on in the world because Ed and Jerry playing a great attack with you have a late delivery and he's like, okay. And they're like, wait a minute, you get deliveries? It's like, I don't know. Do I? He has no idea. And that's how they get up there because you invite the delivery man in, it's not an Amazon guy, but it might as well have been at this point. And that's how Ed gets in. And this is going to be the end of Ed, but I got to say the attack is pretty brutal and really well done.
Showdown.
Yes, it is. There's a lot of blood and a lot of gore going on here. I
love that Peter Vincent has a panic room.
Yes.
And that he very promptly runs to the panic room because, someone in his position would have a panic room and that is absolutely what they would do. And I love this. I don't know if this was intentional or if I'm reading into it, but I love, it seemed like an homage to the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie that Ed loses his arm and he kind of goes off about, he took my arm, which totally gave me flashbacks to the Buffy movie. Which is one of my favorites.
Yes, it's like Paul Rubens.
Yes, it had like a little touch of that and it just made me so happy, warmed my heart. And then, for Ed and Charlie to square off is, just for the action sequence, just for the fight sequences is cool to watch, but there's also the weight that's behind it from the baggage left over from the way their friendship ended in life. So there's more at stake than just getting out of there alive. Like these guys have history. And so
there's a sweet touch to the end of it too when he finally stakes Ed and takes him out, and as Ed realizes like he's disintegrating or whatever, he says to Charlie, like, it's okay, Charlie, it's okay. It's almost like, thank you, you released me from this hell. And I was like, wow, like that was, I did not expect that from this movie, but it was I was like, again, a dumber remake wouldn't bother with something like that. He'd just stake him and it'd be over. Yeah, but they play through that. So again, we don't know their history other than, some stories in the hallway and some random YouTube or proto YouTube video of them, sword and sandaling in the backyard. And I don't know, it's a sweetness to it. And the other thing too is that Amy is not just this shrieking violet either. Like she pulls that gun out, she shoots Jerry, which he has a great like those are werewolves, and then she realizes, oh, holy water. She does like vampires, and I love that. I was like, oh, that's great, girl. You get your shot in because that was perfect.
That was one of my favorites. When she went for the revolver, I was thinking, and she looks at the bullets. I'm like, those are silver bullets. That's not going to work. Because, for those of us who watch a lot of horror movies and creature features and monster movies, it's like, no, silver bullets is werewolves. It's not going to work. You're like, this is a trap. And so for them to acknowledge it, that, she's trying to use this weapon that isn't really a threat to him, but because she is a smart, capable character, she covers real fast and improvises. And yeah, it's a fun scene.
Yeah, it's great. And then they're trying to run out of there, of course, and they get into the club, and we get the repeat of the club scene, though again we don't get the Ceci dance this time, but Jerry does separate them. And I like the way that he basically hypnotizes her by just looking at her. They hold on to that's like standard vampire lore. If they can get their eyes locked on you, you just melt. Like they can do that to you, the good ones, right? And he cuts himself and puts it on his lips, and they make out a little bit, and she's just into it. And I thought it was great, and because Doris did this too. Jerry starts to bite her and feed on her, and of course, Charlie can't do anything about it. He's stuck in the back with the security guard in the club, and Amy, while she's her head's tilted over, says this tear just runs right down her face. And I'm like, man, that is, and you can tell like that's the actual actress doing that. I'm like, that is a nice touch of just sadness and resignation. And it's like, this is, and that's when everything's gone to hell at that point. And that's how they cap act two. And up to this point, like they've changed a lot of things, but the movie is falling very similar to the way the other one did. And I'm kind of impressed that they're holding on to the structure while having a very different party inside. It's like going back to the same club, but it's a different motif, And
it's very much like that club scene is very much nightclub in a casino in Vegas.
Yes.
The crowd, the throwing the t-shirts, like all of that is it just looks very authentic. It looks like it belongs. It doesn't look like they kind of tried to manufacture something that would, work in the movie as a remake of the original. This is okay. We'll do a nightclub, but it's a Vegas nightclub, and it's going to look like Vegas and feel like Vegas. And it really fits. It doesn't feel like something that they went out of their way to manufacture.
No, you get that slamming industrial music. You got, again, the t-shirt cannons, the dancers. You got the bar that's like really lit up, like it's at a cocktail or something. I mean, it's everything. Like you say, it's the Vegas casino club experience. And you've got the security who look like, if you've ever been to Vegas, y'all, security look like the security here. They probably were guys that they just hired. They're all these huge ex-football players. They weigh 300 pounds. They can throw you through a roof. And if you say one side word to them, you're out on the street. They're not going to let you pass. And I love that because too many times in these movies, like people just get past the dumb security guard. I'm like, no, if you try to run in Vegas, that's not the worst thing you can do. Like you're going down if that happens. So I did appreciate that nice little touch. We didn't talk about the big car chase scene that happened though, that really sets up the other thing here. Jerry decides that, okay, if you won't let me in the house, I'll just blow the house up. And I was like,
that was wild.
That was nuts. I mean, he's digging up the gas line in the yard, cuts it, lights it on fire, and you see that flame fly down the tube, and it's like, oh, this is bad. And I was like, what a great idea though, because that's the kind of thing you usually do at the end of a movie. And I'm like, nope, the big bad wolf's just gonna blow your house in.
It was unexpected. It's like, at first I thought maybe he had vampires stashed in their lawn or something. I was like, why else would you be digging? And so when he pulls on the line, I was like, oh, for real? We're going to go there?
Yeah.
Now?
You get like a lethal weapon explosion in the middle of this. So they get to the car, they drive out. Mom hits Charlie's motorcycle slightly. And as Jerry tries to crank it, he realizes the front wheel's jacked up. And this is a great scene in 3D. He throws the bike through the back of the Jeep Cherokee, and that wheel is about to take Amy's head out. That was a great scene. The CGI shows itself most in this scene because the driving around, it's like, but I can tell you, having seen it in theaters in 3D, it looked awesome. In 2D, it doesn't look as cool, but in 3D, it looked like he was coming on top of you, like when he's driving around them. So I'm like, that ain't gonna look as good when it translates down, but it was a cool 3D sequence for him to drive around them in the CGI car.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of practical effects, and that's something we discussed when we talked about the original Fright Night. And so, yeah, the CGI in the last half of the movie, starting with that scene, I was a little like, wah, wah. But then at the same time, you know, I can look at what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish visually using the CGI, like all those beats, and it's cool. I'm cool with it.
I mean, it works for what it's trying to do because it sets up that the car stops in the middle of the road and they don't know where he went. They're looking for him. And then random guy doesn't see them on the highway and rear ends them. And it turns out to be Chris Sarandon in a great cameo to get killed by Colin Farrell. But I loved that. I was like, oh, that's a great wink and a nod. I'm like, yeah, that I like that kind of thing. I thought that was smart. And I love too that Jerry or Charlie goes after Jerry with a cross and he grabs it and his hand goes on fire and he blows it out. He's like, they ain't gonna be good enough. And I love it. He says this to Charlie. He's like, I've been staked. It sucks. It hurts, but nobody ever gets the heart. They miss it. And then mom comes with that big Century 21 real estate sign right through the back. And, it doesn't kill him, but I love how he just kind of scampers off. Like, he
almost moves like an insect.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that goes into the whole burrowing in the ground part that, they've talked about, or that it gets revealed. I like that. I like that mom stood up for herself. But of course she passes out at the end of it because we have to throw Toni Collette to the side for some reason in this movie. I wish she could have hung around because I really liked her, but it's got to be about the kids. We know that. So that gets her to the hospital. All this goes down. And so Charlie realizes, like, all I can do now, I've got to take the attack to him. I've got to go back to Peter and get some help, and at this point, Peter's trying to pack up and get out of Dodge. He says, I'll give you this steak and it'll turn everybody magically back, which I'm like, okay, when they laid that out, I was like, well, that's obviously what's going to happen in the end. We're going to save a lot of people with this, which I've seen and heard that in other vampire stories. So it's not like uncommon. It just seems like, Chekhov's steak. It's going to have to go off, at some point.
In some vampire stories, it's part of the lore that killing the master will either kill or release, the people that he's turned.
Right. Right.
So that's not that crazy. But I think it is something about the fact that it depends on the device, the stake to do it. That, it does. Yeah, it has that Chekhov steak thing going for it. But I'm okay. It's okay.
It's just it's a thing that gets dropped, and if you don't catch it, you'll watch it again later and go like, oh, that's why everybody's sort of normal at the end. But it's all about the arm up scene here for Charlie. And, Peter's giving him the backstory. And what I love that he tells him, it's like, not only my parents get killed by this, why do you think I collect all this stuff? You think it's just part of the show? You think I thought it was cool? It's like, no, I am scared of this my whole life. So he decides, Charlie does, like, well, I know what to do now, because Peter says, well, if you can light a vampire on fire, you can really distract them when you're trying to, stake them, get closer to stake them. And Charlie gets this great idea of, I'm going to get a fire retardant suit and I'm going to light myself on fire like Nikki Sixx when the time comes. It's an insane plan. But they go over to Jerry's to attack, breaking out windows. We get all of that again. And I love the fact that Jerry is like, oh, good, I'm glad you came. Now let me just leave you to her. And Amy is just as vicious. And I'm like, man, the Amy vampire, they recreate that, scary mouth and all that full of teeth. I thought that was really, really well done. It's CGI to heck, but it still looks good.
But hers look really good.
Yeah, it did.
I thought hers looked really good. Like when Colin Farrell, when we got his full transformation earlier, right before he killed Chris Sarandon on the highway, his was a little wonky, the CGI on that, but on hers, it looked nice. I thought it was pretty effective.
Yeah, it was really good. And of course she's going to try to bite Charlie, and he actually stakes her. And I'm like, wow, that's a move like I didn't see coming. He did some holy water on her last time. It was, I'm melting, So this is much cooler. And I love that she drops that line like, you missed. He's like, I meant to. I'm just trying to get you out of the way so that I can, go take care of business. Yeah. And poor Peter Vincent has shown up. He's gonna help, and he is worthless in all of this fight because he's drunk. And what I like is that all these vampires are basically feeding on him. It's like a frenzy. And I'm like, wow, Peter Vincent is going down in this. And I don't know. I thought that was cool. And Charlie comes up with the idea of blowing holes in the ceiling so that sunlight can come in and get him off of Peter. And it sets up a last moment where Jerry gets to do the James Bond villain thing and tell you what he's going to do to you. And normally I'd be like, oh, that's kind of dumb. But I actually like it. And I like it because of the way Colin Farrell plays it. He's so sadistic.
Yeah.
It's and I think you have to have an actor that has that kind of charisma and charm to just turn it a little to the side, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's really scary.
Yeah, no, and you're right. It's and usually in the Bond villain thing, a lot of times you kind of walk away from it, from a scene like that, going like, God, how stupid is that? To lay out your whole plan, and you're just wasting time, and you could have been done with it. But you're right. In this one, the Jerry character, as he's portrayed by Colin Farrell, like, he is sadistic. He gets a kick out of this, just like he got a kick out of watching Charlie go through all the trouble of getting Doris out of the apartment, knowing full well that Doris was not going to survive the sunlight. In this scenario, it's like he knows he's got Charlie right where he wants him. The sun will go down eventually. They're trapped. They're surrounded. And he's getting this pleasure from watching Charlie squirm and from this situation that he's created.
Well, here's that great bit of dialogue about, like, he's talked before about how you can smell things off of people and it just gives off a very specific scent. And he's done it in this way that's like really creepy and like your mom's giving something off and woo, Amy, he's just being such a lech. But this time he's talking about, I can smell your fear. It's a very specific scent. And the way he says it, it's like it's a drug to him. And I'm like, that's another Buffy thing too, because that's a lot of like what made Angel so sadistic was, he just loved scaring the hell out of people before he could kill them. And I like that they, Marty brought that into this because it's like, yes, that's exactly what this kind of vampire would do. And that's why it's so cool when Charlie turns around and says, well, we're going to do what you gave me the idea for. And Peter Vincent's like, what? And he sees him putting on the mask. He's like, okay. And so when he lights himself on fire to jump at the vampire, I'm like, that is a genius move. It's insane, but it's genius. Crazy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I actually watched this twice in the last 24 hours prior to our conversation, because I wanted to make sure I got a little nuances. And the first go around, I was kind of like, well, why didn't you throw it at, like, I was just kind of like, did you really need to light yourself on fire? And I think it was kind of, I was just like, that's nuts. But it does make sense. It's like, Jerry's too quick with his vampire speed. You're not going to be able to throw a lighter at him. You're not going to be able to get close enough to light him. But you can use the surprise of lighting yourself up and flinging your body at him to catch him off guard and get close enough. So it is pretty genius.
I mean, it was a great idea because it does catch him off guard because he shot so many things at him and Jerry catches the arrows every time. Like you say, he even says, like, you think I've been alive 400 years without knowing how to survive? Like, there's no way you can beat me. Well, you have to turn the tables on him and something he doesn't expect, which is you're going to put yourself in extreme danger to try to get at me.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I will say when it goes full CGI Jerry here at the end, it doesn't look great. It doesn't look bad, but it's like, oh, well, that definitely became not an actor very quickly in this scene when we stab him. I felt like I was looking at General Grievous from Revenge of the Sith for a minute. I mean, it has a little bit of that to it.
True.
It doesn't, and it ends about as dumb. But
you're not wrong, my friend.
Yeah, but we get the magic St. Michael's stank that, of course, kills Jerry. And what I like is that it takes him a long time to die. which it should. And it took that, it took the Sarandon vampire forever to blow up and die with the sunlight and all that last time. So they keep that around, and then we see the black spirit jump out of all the people that are still alive down there, and they're all restored to normal. And Dave Franco punctuates this with a hell of a night.
Because I always love that moment in a movie where like people kind of come to and don't know where they are and are kind of trying to like figure it out.
Yeah,
and it would make sense that like a teenage boy who looks like the type to go to keggers and like like this is probably not the first time he woke up someplace and didn't know what happened.
This kid grew up in Las Vegas. Like God knows where he's woken up.
This is not a new scenario. The vampire thing is not something he's used to, but waking up in a strange basement might have happened before.
Yeah. What's so much funny about it is Amy and Charlie are having this whole cute scene about, hey, how are you? I'm good. And Peter Vince is the one that plants one on Charlie at the end of it. Again, it's not what you expect, but it's exactly what you think that guy would do in this moment. Yeah. And it's funny. And so we get to the end here, which is great, is Peter Vincent essentially loans Charlie and Amy his penthouse, which sure. Okay. And we didn't talk about it last time or go over the scene specifically, but Amy's been trying to get Charlie in bed the whole movie. So she's finally got him. And Peter walks through, of course, we have some fun there. And then he leaves. And I love she gets the last line about, do we finally have some alone time? Finally, can I get you to myself? And that's how it cuts out. I thought that was a cute way to end it.
It was cute. As far as these kind of, happy ending kind of things goes, I like the way that they set it up. It didn't go on too long. It's just enough of an homage to the original, but they've got their own flavor, and the characters are true to themselves to the end. It was a fun way to end it.
And I think it's neat that you end a remake with a song that is a cover that is not what you expect. 99 Problems from Jay-Z has a very specific flavor to it.
Yeah.
And then Hugo gets it, and it's this banjo bluegrass street busker version with all this harmony in it. And it's like, that's not exactly what I expect here. But I thought, that's genius of whoever decided to stick that there, is like, that punctuates the whole thesis of this movie. This story, but here's it from a different set of tone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like ironic music. I think it's fun when you do stuff like that. Mr. Sandman and Halloween 2 like introduced that concept to me. So to do it here, I was like, well, that's exactly what I would expect from somebody that wrote years of Buffy. Like that's
a nice touch.
Yeah, that's what you do at the end of these things. And it, I like the fact that we get the credit swipes and you get everybody's sort of best scene, to show who they are, because there's no opening credits. It's just Fright Night, and then boom, you're in the movie.
Right.
So I liked it. I thought it was fun, and it's a cool way to end an interesting movie. But was it cool enough? It's time for final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So Carmelita, what are yours for the 2011 remake of Fright Night?
I had a lot of fun with this. Would I, if someone asked me, hey, let's watch a movie, you want to watch the original Fright Night or the remake? Of course, I'm still going to say the original Fright Night. No question. But I had a lot of fun with this. I think that they made all the right little tweaks to make it their own. It was funny. It was kind of more on the horror action side, but it worked. I had a lot of fun with this. I think the cast was great. Yeah, the CGI was not my favorite, but it's okay. It's a thing that we kind of live with now. It's just the reality. So popcorn, man, this is hard. It's hard. So I'm going to say that it's a medium, but the person who's behind the counter really likes you. because they see you come in all the time. So they like heap it so it's like falling off the sides, and they put a little extra butter on top.
I think you have nailed it in one word. This movie is fun. It is fun. And it takes its origins seriously enough and reverentially enough to pay off most of that stuff while giving us something new. And this movie is rescued by the fact that it's got 4 incredible actors, really 5, leading it the whole way through. Anton Yelchin is great in this. Imogen Poots is great in this. Toni Collette is great in this. Colin Farrell's awesome in this. David Tennant is hilarious in this. If you put other people in, it probably doesn't work as well. And I'll go ahead and say now, they did an homage sequel to this. Don't bother, because they don't have any of that. They don't have anybody in it, one. And if you do, they're not doing anything with it. It's just a cash in. This is what you do when you do a remake. You give it a different flavor. And I'm in the same boat. If somebody asks me, I want to watch a vampire movie that's not Twilight. Okay, thank you. And let's see what we could do with this. And so I would go like, well, watch Fright Night from 1985. And then I would tell them, though, now, if you like that, and if we watched it and they were like, oh, that was awesome, I'm like, you owe it to yourself to go watch the 2011 remake now. Just give it a spin. It's not the 1985 one, but it's still good and it still works on so many levels. And again, the cast is so good. That's what makes it. The people making it obviously cared a lot about it. And they've all worked for years and, continue to do good work. And this one holds up. It's disappointing that it didn't find its audience in a theater, because I'll tell you, having seen it in the 3D, it was really well done. The parts of it that show the edges now are the parts that are obviously the 3D parts. So that's where the CGI really fails. And I agree with you there. That doesn't hold up as well, but the story works. The actors work. It's fun. And I'm going to give it a large popcorn. It's not as strong a large as the last one, because again, that last one is classic, but this one's still really good. And I think 10 years on now, more and more, and I just kind of did a scan review. There've been a lot of people writing about this movie the last 3 or 4 years that are like, yeah, I should have given that a second look when it came out, because that was worth their time. And I was like, see, I've always said that. So I think this movie is definitely worth the time. And is a good example of a remake that gets it right. Yeah. And so I use it often as an example of like, you know what, this one did it right, and it's worth your time to take a look at again. So large popcorn for me. Definitely recommend folks check it out. Carmelita, it's been a blast talking with you again, talking vampire movies as always. Tell folks how they can follow you on the internet.
So you can find me on Twitter and at Letterboxd. Same handle on both, at Carmelita Says. And it was so much fun talking Fright Night, the remake, with you, Jay. Thank you again so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for being a part of Film Strip. And folks, thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find all of the back episodes of Film Strip at filmstrippodcast.com. You'll find your favorite podcatcher, Apple, Google, Spotify. We're on all of them. Please leave us a positive review. Share the show with others. You can also follow the show's social media at Film Strip Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Get updates about the shows and what's coming up next. All kinds of cool stuff for you to check out, and we'll keep churning out shows probably till microphones stop working. I don't know. We just keep doing new stuff. It's always for there's plenty of movies to watch, and we have a good time talking about them here on the show. So for Carmelita, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.